The other option for Streamlit, if you don't want to download and install a bunch of software on your local machine, and it can get pretty complicated and at times very frustrating, the other option is that you can do everything in the cloud. If you go to Streamlit and then try to sign in or sign up, you will be asked to sign into your GitHub account. Now, GitHub is another online platform. It's a place to store all of your technical work. It's used all over the world by people who are developers, software developers. So it's really common, and it's a great place to, especially if you're working on a team, it's really a version control platform, which means that you can control updates to your software. So for instance, if you're using something like App Inventor or Thunkable, you know that they do have the ability to have checkpoints and saving things, so you can keep track of what version you're on and you don't mess up. You don't write over working code. So with this, the idea is that you can, and let me go in to show you what it looks like. I've got these things called repositories, and the idea of a repository, and I'll go to this one because this is my Streamlit app. So you can see that I've got a Streamlit app.py. If I were to update it, I would have to say check it out, make my updates, and then upload them back up here. And other people on my team or other people that I know could also update it, but they would have to check it out, and then I would only accept their changes to add it to what's called my repository. The idea with Streamlit, what will happen is automatically they're going to create when you create a new app in Streamlit, they're going to create a repository in GitHub for you, as long as you've got your account linked. And then all of that will be stored in the cloud, and it will run in the cloud. So you don't have to run anything locally on your machine. So I'm going to sign in here. And now my GitHub account is linked. If you don't have a GitHub account, then you should create one. Okay, and now I'm in Streamlit, but it's share.streamlit. So it's all shared in the cloud. And they actually give you some templates to play around with that might be interesting to check out. So I'm logged in here. It's connected to my GitHub account. And then what I want to do is create an app. So you can either have an app that you've already built, and it could be something that's already in a GitHub repo. A repo is short for a repository. Or you can create a brand new one. And they have a bunch of templates. And this fork means it's going to take one of their templates, which is on their GitHub account, and forking it means that you're basically creating a copy of it. So I'm going to say that. There's all sorts of options, a dashboard, chatbot, some of those templates that they showed on the page before. I'm going to say a blank app. Then you're going to give it a name. And I'm going to call mine Technovation Soundboard. This is just because I've already made this once and I just want to distinguish. And then the app URL, this is so that you would have this on the Streamlit gallery. So I might want to say, again, depending on the name, it may not be available, but I'm going to call it Technovation Soundboard. And I'm going to say open GitHub code spaces to immediately edit this app in your browser. And this is so that I'm going to be able to do everything in my browser and not have to do anything on my local computer or install anything. So I'm going to say deploy. And then what happens is, you may notice this kind of looks like Visual Studio Code, if you've ever used that. And it does take a while, this opening remote. It might take a couple of minutes. Okay, and then finally it will load, and you'll see that it opens up a terminal and gets everything running for you, and your app is running. So, and this is the template. They've given us a very basic app. So if we look here, the Streamlit app it's a Python file, streamlit_app.py. And they've imported Streamlit as ST, they've done the title, and they've just written this sentence here. Let's start building. Okay, so we're going to build the Soundboard app. If you've ever done Technovation before, You might be familiar with it. It's basically an app where we have pictures of famous people and we have recordings of their voice. And we're going to be able to click on, and in our case, we're going to click on a button and be able to play that sound. It's a very simple app, but it will show you some of the features of Streamlit. So the first thing we're going to do, however, is in the curriculum is a link. So let me go to that. This download asset files. So you're going to download the asset files, and these are all the files. The three people that we're going to highlight are Martin Luther King, Kamala Harris, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. So these are all famous Americans, and we've got some pictures of them, and we've got short sound clips of the three of them. So those are the three people we're going to highlight. I've already got these downloaded on my computer, so what I'm going to do is go back here, and over here is basically our file manager within this code space. And here we can just click on this plus to create a new folder. And I'm going to call the folder assets. Okay, and then within assets, I'm going to grab them from here. And you're going to download them from Google Drive. What we do is just grab the files and upload them, and we want to drag them into that assets folder. Okay, now they're all there, so I've got the 6 of them, and it will display one of them for us. So we've got the 3 images and the 3 sound files. So now I've added those to my project. I'll reuse this ST title. So our title for this app is going to be Soundboard App. And let's do, instead of write, a subheader, so it's a little bit larger font. And in this case, I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to put in some instructions. So click on a person's name to hear a speech by that person. Over here, it will say, oh, the source file has changed, and we're going to say always rerun. So it will automatically update it whenever we update our code. Okay, so now we've got our new title, Soundboard App, and click on a person's name to hear a speech by that person. Let's start by displaying some images. So if we just do st.image, and if I say assets, which is the folder, a /, anything with a / after it means it's a folder, and then I've got mlk.jpg. And because I've changed it, it automatically appears here. So that's one, and I actually want to display all 3 images, and I want them to appear next to each other. To do that, I'm going to set up columns. So st.columns, and then we just tell how many, and we want 3. So I've got 3 columns, and I'm going to call them calls. So give that, it's a variable, and we're going to call it calls. And then what we can do is say, instead of st.image, calls is now an array with 3 elements in it. So this is the first, and arrays in most languages, if you're used to Alphabet or Thunkable, they start counting at 1, but most programming languages, they actually start counting at 0. So the first element in an array is the 0th element. So the first element will be this, and then if I wanted to, I could say calls one.image, and I'll put Kamala Harris next. And there she appears. And let's just copy and paste that, and we'll do 2 is Brown Jackson. And there she appears. Okay, so we have them each in a column showing the image. Okay, at this point, I'm going to try to shorten this up a bit and actually use a loop. We've got 3 people here, but we could potentially add many more people. And so it might be nice if we can just put this all into a loop and do it with a shorter amount of code. I'm going to first set up an array with the names of the 3 people. And you just put in the square bracket, and in this case, I'll put in their names. Okay, so I've got the names, and then I'm going to do the same for the images and their sounds. So I'm going to call this image array, and these will all be the file names. So I can just copy these. And then we'll do the final for the speeches. And let me just copy this, and I'll call the speech array. And let me update the names, MP3 for MLK, and this is just Kamala, MP3, and this is the same, but MP3. So just checking that I've got them all spelled correctly, and so that's the speech array. Once we've got this, now what we can do is replace these 3 lines. We're going to replace it with a loop and get everything kind of loaded together. So we'll do this with a for loop. So for, and we'll just give it, we have to give it a variable name. So I'm just going to say C to stand for columns. For C in, and we've got to tell it how many times we want to loop. And we want to loop as many as what we've got here. And I could just say, to 3. But I'm going to say the range is going to be from 0 to the length. So len is the length of an array, and we just need to give it an array. So I've got 3 arrays, they're all the same length, and so I'm going to just use names. And then in Python you need a colon. Calls, in this case we're going to, instead of a 0, we'll put the C, so that it's going to loop each time, and C will equal 0, then it will equal 1, then it will equal 2. And we could say call C dot image. And the image we want to display is the image array, and it's going to be the same thing, the C. Okay, and look what we've got. We've got the exact same thing. So instead of using a 0, 1, and a 2, this is much more concise, especially because we're going to be also displaying names and playing sounds. This also is more versatile in the fact that we could add many more pictures and names, and we wouldn't have to change any of our code other than updating the number of columns. I want to display the name of the people, but I'm going to put it in a button. So the idea would be that there'll be the person's name with the button under the picture. The user will click on the button and it will play the sounds. To do that, we're also going to do it within the column. So call C dot, and we just say button to create a button. And within that, we need to tell it, and if you look up here, it's a nice feature here is that we can see what all the inputs are. So we can give it a label, a key, there can be a help on there. So there's a bunch of different arguments we can add. So the first thing we want to do is add the names. So it's going to be names C, and immediately we can see that they've shown up nicely. Also, we need to say, well, when they click the button, what do we want to do? So on click, and I'm going to give it the name of a function, which I haven't yet made, but I'm going to. I have to pass it, well, which button am I clicking on? 0, 1, or 2. We say this with args. So if you're passing something into a function, it's called an argument. And this is just the Python way. We say list them in here in basically an array. And the argument we want to send is C, right? Which is the 0, the 1, or the 2. And you give it a comma saying there could be more here, but in this case, there's nothing more. I want to make them kind of centered under the picture. So I'm going to say use container with equals, and I'm going to say true, which will, and it's giving me an error because button click is not defined. Let's make that button click. And I'm going to go way up the top. So it's kind of standard to put all your functions at the top and then kind of the main running code of your app to go at the bottom. So to create a function, it's def, we're defining it, and we're calling this button click. And remember we have the argument of C. We can call it anything here. So let's just say call. We'll call this call. And we need a colon for Python. And then in this case, let's say st.audio. So the st is the main Streamlit window, right? So we're going to say st.audio. And the st audio is how you play a sound file. We give it the data, which is the sound file, And we know that that's in our speech array. And in this case, it's going to be call, because now we've changed the C, we passed it as C, we passed C in, but now within this function it's known as call. The other thing is, let's see, we give it the format. So we need to just tell it that it's going to be an MP3 file. So we say format equals, and we're going to say audio, it's an audio file, and an MPEG is the correct way of saying that. Refresh it. So what happens is when you do this ST audio, it actually pops up with like this audio interface.
I have a dream that my 4 little children.
Okay. Martin Luther King, Kamala.
And my mother and father, they came from opposite sides of the world.
Okay. And Ketanji Brown Jackson.
As it happens, I share a birthday with the first Black woman ever to be appointed as a federal judge, the Honorable Constance Baker Motley.
Okay, so we've got all 3 of them working. The one thing I want to do though is I don't really like this being up here. I'd rather have it down below. And I think it's just because of where this appears. So I'm going to go down below here. And what I'm going to do is create a container. I'm going to call it speech container. And it's just an equal st.container. Just to make sure we've got it showing, I'm just going to turn on the border and let's put something in it so we can see it. And we can just say .write, and I'm going to put audio. Let's refresh this. Okay, sometimes it's kind of funky there once it gets an error. So now we're going to change this to be the speech container. And I'll just click on that. So it should now appear down here. Let's try it.
I have a dream.
Okay.
And my mother.
And the last one.
As it happens.
Okay, so we've got all 3 of them working and they're appearing down here in this nice little container. So we've created a nice little soundboard app with very little code. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure we save it back up on our GitHub. Down here, we've got, I think we can ignore these downloads. That might be something I did. The U means that we've updated. Oh, actually, they're untracked changes. And then down here, the M means that we've modified. We want to make sure that this gets saved back up in our GitHub, in our repository. So if you remember, we forked the original repository, which was the template, and we're going to save it. Click over here on source control. And this is where we get the list of things that have changed. We have to put a message in here. So we'll just say original commit of coded Soundboard app. If we click commit, we get this no stage changes to commit. The way that GitHub works is you stage your changes, so you kind of get them ready to commit, and then you commit them. So we are going to, in this case, be able to do that all in one shot. And we'll say yes. Now they're committed, but they haven't been what's called pushed. So then it gets pushed up to the GitHub repository. This is how we do it here. It's very simple here from CodeSpace. We just say sync the changes, and it says this action will pull and push commits to and from origin main, and that is kind of our main, what's called branch of the repository. This is the simple way to do it again, and we'll just say okay. Okay, so I believe this has pushed it up, so let's check. So I'm going to go back to my GitHub. I'm just going to refresh this to make sure I get the latest. And this Technovation soundboard is what I called it. And I can see, hopefully, that I've got all my assets here. Yes. And the Streamlit app should have my new code in it, and it does. here's how it will work. Then in Streamlit, so let me close out of this. So if I close this one, I can go back here to Streamlit and let's again refresh. So my Technovation Soundboard main, let's click on it. It will display your app in its own web page. So this is now a valid URL, and you could send this to people and they could run your app. So this works
I have a dream.
just like the app. So that's a cool thing. Is say I want to go edit it again. So I can say edit with code spaces. And what it's going to do is open it back up in code space again. You can go ahead, edit, make any changes you want. And then what you have to do is remember to go to source control, commit your stuff, and then sync it. So it goes and gets saved back up in GitHub. The fact that you're using GitHub, you can actually share this amongst team members and you can work on different parts of it. So that's a nice feature of GitHub.